All right, we will be emailing out a recording this available for you too at the end of this program. So I'm going to get started since we just started the recording. My name is Amelia. I work for the Department of Natural Resources and Outreach and Communication. And joining me today, we've got some BearWise experts. We've got Andy Try and Franklin Whittaker, and I'll let them take it away.
Thanks, Amelia. Hey, folks, I'm Andy Try. I'm the Bear Project leader with the DNR, and I've got my colleague here, Franklin Whittaker, with the Wildlife Damage Program. I'm based out of Grand Rapids, and Franklin's based out of Brainerd. But we're gonna go off video here just to save some bandwidth for y'all, and let's get this thing rolling. Okay, so BearWise is super cool. All right, now it's advancing. So BearWise is a program developed by state agency bear biologists, originally in the southeastern part of the country, that wanted to make sure that folks were getting the same consistent messages about how to coexist with black bears originally, but now they're delving into grizzly bears. The same consistent information no matter where they go. And so you know, even if you don't live in bear country, like Nebraska or Illinois generally isn't considered bear country, but those folks travel to places with bears. And so getting that consistent information is important. And so these are basically some tenets and simple communication tools that are used to convey information about black bears and reduce conflict as well. And it's hosted by the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. So all of the state and federal wildlife management agencies across the country are members of this overall organization, and that's it's been housed in that program. So going backwards, up until the 1960s, or through the 1960s, bears were considered a varmint species. And so what that means is you could kill a bear for any reason, 365, 24/7. And due to that, where bears used to be across the state, which was pretty much anywhere where there was forest, that was reduced to this kind of small quarter of the northeastern part of the state in the 1960s. They did get occasional sightings beyond that edge of bear range, but they were pretty rare. The cross hatching that marked zones of protection, there were special parts of the state that were protected by commissioner order where you couldn't kill these bears for reasons. You had to get a special permission or permission from the wardens at the time. But due to the elevation of bears to a big game species, that reduced overall mortality from all year round, basically, to just 6 weeks during the hunting season. And so due to that, it allowed population expansion. And so when the Bear Project started in the early 80s, on the right-hand side is what you see for what bear range was. And so the green is considered primary range. That's where we've got the most abundant bear populations. And it's kind of what we call the core of the bear range as well, and we'll use those interchangeably. And that secondary range is where people see bears regularly. Sometimes you'll get females with cubs, but it's not considered like where it's really easy to find bears. And so due to some really heavy duty management and some strict protections, the bear population expanded both numerically and geographically from the 80s until the early 2010s. And basically bear range had pushed west and south. In the 80s, Pine County kind of was the line for bears in the state. And as you can see, bear range has pushed up all the way into the North Metro with a small population of bears down in the southeastern part of the state as of 2014, so 10 years ago. And so in 2017, we started collecting bear sightings outside of primary range. We have a website that you can log these bear sightings at that we'll share in the chat here. But the 2014 range is in that green and yellow, and this is the sightings over the last 7 years. And as you can see, the Twin Cities are covered up with bear sightings, and we have bear sightings as far west as like almost to Pipestone, west to the Red River Valley, Big Stone Traverse County, just all over the place. And now these are sightings, not necessarily where people are always seeing bears, but it just shows you the breadth of where people are seeing bears, and it's much wider than we anticipated. The reason this is mostly expanding is not because the bear population is bursting at the seams. We're not at carrying capacity or anything like that, but it's likely migration, human tolerance, and relatively low hunting pressure, a combination of things. And as bear range expands, when mom kicks the cubs out at 17 months, they're yearlings at that time, they'll give a portion of their home range to the daughter, and it kind of expands in little cells and home ranges across the landscape, but it's pretty slow in sort of a honeycomb fashion. Looking back at human-bear conflict through time and the bear population, we were coming out of a population low in the early 80s of about 8,000 bears. That increased to about 20,000 or so statewide, and complaints shot up with that bear population increase. And then we shifted how we operate to a more attractance-based system where we don't trap and move bears anymore. We haven't done that for 20 years, more than 20 years now, and focus more on resolving the problem at home. So when you trap and move bears, it doesn't resolve the underlying symptom, which is that there's attractant that brought the bear to the area. It just moves the bears elsewhere, sometimes moves the problem elsewhere. Bears are more likely to get hit by cars on the way back, and sometimes you're dropping them off in a place that's unfamiliar and not their home range. And so the complaints really dropped dramatically in the early 2000s and have been relatively level the last 10 years or so, about 800 calls per year for the agency, but that varies with good and bad food years. And then similarly, there was a push to drop the population a bit due to property damage in the late 90s, mostly with agriculture. So we did that. It dropped back down to about 10,000, and then it's been coming back to some sort of like Goldilocks happy medium in between. So we're sitting at, 15, 17,000 bears, somewhere between 14 and 20,000 with the confidence intervals. Breaking that down by the state, the higher line, solid line, is the estimate of the population in that core bear range. And then the bottom, the greenish line that's been increasing, is on the edge of bear range, and that basically has been increasing the last 20 years, whereas the quota has essentially stabilized but had been declining prior to 2013. And so what this means is we have bears being found in new areas that they haven't been found in, nearly a century. And so, this is the new norm of expanding bear country. There's, always been bears in Hermantown, but human bear conflict is a part of this, and there's some things we can do to reduce this. But interestingly of note, last year in Northfield, that was the first time bears had been sighted there in over a century. That bear did end up getting hit by a car on I-35, but still bears expanding well into places that haven't been in a long time. We've got resident bears in Maple Grove. We have bears in White Bear Lake. We have bears in Litchfield. We have bears in Birchwood Village, which is right near White Bear Lake. North suburbs, North Oaks, Rogers, western suburbs. We're getting sightings over at the Purgatory Creek area near Eden Prairie. And so this nest camera on the left is from Hugo. And so, like it or not, bears and humans are just going to mix. And some of the increased sightings that we're getting are from these Nest or Ring cameras, these doorbell cameras that most people didn't have 15, 20 years ago, or even 10 years ago for that matter. And so the amount of data we're getting on where bears are is good, but it also is a perception that bears are suddenly everywhere, when in fact they probably were here a long time, and people just didn't notice them because they were asleep. Times are changing. That we need to kind of think about how we are in bear country now in the Twin Cities. So the red zone is the 494, 694 loop. That was considered a no-go zone for bears in the late 90s, in which they figured if a bear wandered in that area, it couldn't find its way back out, and lethal intervention was often the solution. It's shifted now. It's not quite that way, but I'm going to overlay some of these sightings over the last few years to show you where people are seeing bears, and there isn't anybody that can't convince me that there's not bears in the Twin Cities that are residents right now. So here's 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 22, and 23. And I don't have the 2024 sightings map, but basically there's just more of the same. So bears are a regular part of the Twin Cities greater metropolitan area. Certainly 7-county metro has a fair number of bears. And it's bear country now where it wasn't before. I grew up in Oak Grove, right on the northern Anoka County line. Never in my life would I thought that there was going to be bears in that area. But you know, there are parts of the summer where my folks can't even put up bird feeders anymore just because there's a number of bears moving through that Cedar Creek corridor. All right, Franklin, you can take it from here.
So like Andy said, bears are basically, bear ranges the entire state of Minnesota now. So one of the benefits of being a member state is we get access to BearWise and the list of some at-home and outdoor basics that help us live and coexist in bear range. So looking at the at-home basics, we have the next slide shows basic number 1, never feed or approach bears. Whether you feed bears intentionally or intentionally through garbage or bird feeders, that's seen as a reward to the bears, and it's similar to rewarding a dog for coming on command. If this repetitive action happens, bears are then drawn towards coming towards people and human-occupied areas. And if food reports are repeated, it leads the bears down a risky path for both people and the bears. Then basic number 2, secure food, garbage, and recycling. Anything that attracts dogs or raccoons will attract bears too. Human food from picnic lunches, spilled snacks on the ground, stuff left over from campsites, all can attract bears. Bears' smell is 7 times better than a dog, so they can smell this stuff from miles away. Securing our garbage and recycling, storing them in bear-resistant trash cans, or using some sort of deterrent measure like energized fencing helps keep the bears from being drawn to that area and then associating that area with food reward. Then basic number 3, remove bird feeders when bears are active. Uh, Pretty much from April to October is the time period where we recommend not feeding birds. Coincidentally, during this time is also when there's enough natural food that you don't really need to feed birds. There's plenty of food out there for them. Bird seed and grains have lots of calories, making them a very attractive, easy meal. So removing bird feeders is the best way to avoid the conflict with bears. Um, a typical 7-pound bird feeder has 18,000 calories, and a hummingbird feeder, 32 ounces of the nectar, has 3,200 calories. So it's an easy source for quick, high calories that those bears are looking for. And then basic number 4, never leave pet food outdoors. Feeding your pet outside, again, draws that bear in, the keen sense of smell. If you have to store your food outside, make sure you're using a bear-resistant can or keeping them in a place where the bears can't smell them. Make sure that you're feeding a single portion and removing and cleaning up after your pets are done feeding. And then, of course, we never recommend feeding stray animals, leaving food out for them, not only bears, but other wildlife. Then basic number 5, or actually before we get to basic number 5, raising chickens in bear country. With the cost of eggs, raising chickens has become more and more popular. Chickens as well as chicken feed, again, are another quick source of calories for bears and makes them attractive. So we want to make sure if you're raising chickens, store your feed in bear resistant containers, keeping them out of sight and away from places where the bears can smell. And then the best option that we recommend is protecting your chickens with energized fencing. Then that brings us to basic number 5, cleaning and storing your grills. Clean your grills after each use, making sure to clean up the grill and fat and food particles, making sure they're thoroughly removed. Again, that keen sense to smell, the bears will smell a grill for miles and miles away. So make sure that you're cleaning them after use as well as storing them. The 4 steps that BearWise recommends for cleaning your grill is to burn off food particles after each use, then clean and remove the grease pans. Make sure you're not dumping them on your property. That's another attractant. And then covering your grills. And then lastly, if the bears are active in your area, store the grills indoors. Make sure that, of course, your propane tanks are kept outside to avoid fire risk. Then BearWise basic number 6, alert your neighbors of bear activity. So you see the video here is a bear getting run off, and making sure to tell your neighbors that that bear was in your yard so that they can not only be aware and follow the basics themselves, but if you are doing everything you can to be bear wise, but your neighbor's not, that bear is still going to be attracted to the area. Bears have adapted to living near people. Now it's up to us to adapt to living near the bears. So what do we do if bears are in our stuff? First and foremost, we want to make sure that you're in a safe place and a distance from the bear. Make sure that the bears have a clear exit. Never stand between the bear and an exit. Wait for the bear to leave and enjoy seeing a really cool animal. The mere presence of a bear in your yard isn't necessarily a threat. Um, Make sure that you're notifying your neighbors of the bear activity. Um, and then wait for the bear to leave. Once the bear is gone, uh, BearWise has a at-home checklist that you can use to learn not only what attracts a bear, but also how we can keep bears away from our property. And that link is in the chat. If you are having consistent bear conflicts after you have thoroughly secured all your attractants, contact your local DNR wildlife office for some help. As Andy mentioned before, the DNR does not trap and move bears. It doesn't solve the underlying issue of the attractants. Moving bears from one conflict often moves them over to a new area to cause new conflict. And then, as Andy mentioned before, bear survival when we do relocate bears is often lower because they're in a new area away from their home bear range. So BearWise also has some outdoor basics if you're out and about enjoying Minnesota's outdoors. Basic number 1, stay alert and stay together. Make sure you're paying attention of your surroundings. BearWise recommends not having earbuds or anything like that in that'll distract you. When you're walking, hiking, jogging, or cycling, try to do it with somebody else if possible. And if you're doing it with somebody else, make sure that you're in a group, keeping the group together. And if you have small children, make sure that you're keeping them in sight and close to you. And lastly, make sure you're making noise every so often. By making noise, you let the bears know that you're there, and naturally the bears want to stay away from you. So you making noise will cause the bears to want to kind of keep their distance. Then outdoor basic number 2, leave no trash or food scraps. We recommend double bagging your food when you're out hiking, and make sure that if you pack it in, you're packing out, including all your trash. Don't leave peels or cores. Although they may seem harmless, it's still food scraps that then helps the bear associate that trail or campsite with a food reward, which will cause problems for the next group of hikers or campers. Use bear-proof containers and dumpsters to store your food, as well as food-scented items. Then BearWise basic number 3, keep your dogs leashed. We recommend keeping them on a non-retractable leash. Dogs barking or chasing after bears can lead to a bear needing to protect itself, seeing the dog as a threat. If you see a bear, turn around and leave. If your dog gets into an encounter with a bear, don't rescue it. You will get injured. Use bear spray. Bear spray is effective from 30 feet away, allowing you to do it from a safe distance. If your dog runs after a bear, chances are if you call it and it comes towards you, that bear is going to be following with that triggered prey response. Then BearWise basic number 4, camping safely. Recommend setting up your campsite not in dense cover and away from natural food sources. You don't want to be camping on a spot where a bear knows and remembers where a berry patch is. Cook as far away from your tent as possible to avoid that smell from cooked food, not only attracting the bear, but lingering on your tent. Don't store food, toiletries, trash, or anything that smells or could be perceived as food by bears inside your tent, including the clothes you wear when you're cooking. You want to store those away, preferably in a bear-proof container or in your locked vehicle. Keep your site tidy from clean of trash and other foods. Not only is it good idea to just keep the bears away from that area again, associating it with food reward, but also it's just good for nature. Then the outdoor basic number 5. Oh, actually, before we get to that, here's a video of a campsite that they have food on the table. You'll notice the bear-resistant trash can in the back not being utilized. So here, bear comes up, finds food out on a picnic table. There's a person inside the tent videotaping. A hiker walks by. One positive thing is it sounds like their dog is in the car, so it's not out loose running around. And you can see this bear has probably been habituated to be around people in campsites before. Got the bear horn there, and the car horn is not effective in deterring the bear. And there a lady in the back calls out for somebody to have bear spray. Basic number 5, if you encounter a black bear, so you want to make sure you know what to do. If you see a black bear before it notices you, don't approach it, stand still, enjoy seeing the bear, and then quietly back and calmly back away. If a bear sees you, make sure you back away slowly. Don't turn your back to the bear, never run. Running will trigger a chase response. And then if a bear approaches you, make sure you hold your ground, wave your arms, and make yourself as big as possible, yelling, "Hey bear," until the bear leaves. If the bear continues approaching, then that's when you want to use your bear spray. Leading us to the next basic, carry bear spray and know how to use it. Some thoughts on bear spray: make sure you're only buying canisters labeled for bears. Uh, don't share your bear spray. Make sure you're carrying your own canister. Using holsters or harnesses allow for quick access. Never pre-spray anything. Bear spray is a deterrent, not a repellent. And then make sure you're checking the expiration date to make sure that bear spray is effective. You always want to check manufacturer directions on how to use bear spray, but some basics on bear spray is releasing the clip, holding the bear spray firmly with both hands. Then you want to aim down towards the bear's feet. And then you want to spray in short bursts of 2 to 3 seconds, starting when the bear is about 30 feet away. You don't want to hold and spray your entire can at once. In case the bear continues to approach, you have another spray to spray again. And kind of a final thought to leave you with. Black bears are incredible creatures that are out and about just being bears. The mere presence of a black bear isn't necessarily a threat. The key is to stay safe, stay at a safe distance, and be proactive to never let bears get into birdseed, garbage, and other attractants. Being BearWise is a commitment to a lifestyle of coexisting with bears and helping to protect people, pets, and property. and keep bears wild. Bears are naturally scared of people. Although they are wild animals and deserve your respect, you shouldn't necessarily be afraid of the mere presence of a bear. And with that, enjoy this picture of a bear out and about foraging.
All right. Apparently my slide is freezing a little bit here. But mom's getting a snack while the cubs are playing in the background there. So with that, folks, if they've got time enough for questions, Franklin and I will certainly handle those. Take it away, Amelia.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing a bit about the history of bears in Minnesota and how we can live with them today. Right, there's a Q&A function on the right side of your screen if you're following at home, so please put your questions in there. We'll get started with a couple that are similar, so I'll read them both together. Benita asked about the video that we watched with the view out the tent. What went right and what went wrong in the video? And then Kathy asked, in that video shown, what should the person have done to stay safe?
Sure. So I will preface that with that's a very extreme situation in which a bear was clearly food conditioned and not not an ideal situation. In many states and other places, including this one, if a bear is that close to people and becomes to be a persistent risk, that's likely a candidate for lethal removal. So we don't want it to get to that point. However, the stuff that went right, people had bear horns, people had, we're mentioning bear spray, the dogs were locked away in a vehicle or on a leash. They weren't charging in the situation. The person recording stayed calm. There was shouting, all the good stuff. The bad stuff, there's food all over the table, left out in coolers and that sort of thing. And when you're in the situation where you're eating, that's not a problem. But that food locker behind them had stuff on top of the locker, but I would hazard a guess that most of the food was just left out on the table. And if there are lockers provided, you want to make sure to use those. Like if you're up at Voyagers, for example, you're required to use them. That we used to have a whole bunch of bear problems bear conflicts up in Voyagers up until the late 90s. And then when they started putting those lockers in, it's basically dropped them to nil. And so you just want to make sure to use those when available. If they're not available, just keep them locked in your vehicle with the windows up to keep the scent from blowing around. Bears are smart enough to figure out how to lift car doors, and when they get in, they can just thrash a vehicle completely. So kudos to the people recording the video. They stayed super calm. I don't know if everybody, even myself, would have had the wherewithal to like think about that and record the situation. But all in all, no contact was made with a person, and the bear wasn't trying to break into a tent or anything. And for the most part, many things were done right.
Great. Jacob asked, how should you dispose of expired bear spray that was never used?
Ooh, that's a good question. So it is an EPA rated pesticide, technically. And so what I would probably recommend is just contact your local waste disposal, or like your soil conservation? No, it's your waste district. Like when you're doing hazardous waste removal for other stuff like paint and that sort of thing, and they'll have a better idea for how to do it. You know, how this works generally is it's not the capsaicin, the pepper spray itself that goes bad, it's the propellant. And so, you know, you can discharge it out in a area, but you're just going to be releasing pepper spray into, into the air, which can always, you got to be mindful of wind and that sort of thing. So I'd recommend just contacting your local municipality and seeing what they would recommend to get rid of it.
Sounds good. Philip says that they're heading to the Boundary Waters in early June and wondering what campers encountering bears should do if they don't have pots and pans to bang or they don't have bear spray, like maybe it was discharged earlier or something else is going on. What are other solutions?
Sure. Making noise is a big one. You can you'll have your paddles nearby. smacking them on a tree, hucking a piece of firewood at them, just make the bear feel uncomfortable in camp. Those of you that are in the boundary waters just should be aware that as far as I'm aware, there's still the food storage order requirement in place. And there is a new food storage order going in place in the Chippewa National Forest as well in the developed campgrounds. So just be aware of those regulations. But in general, making noise, making the bear feel uncomfortable. If you don't have bear spray, it's not a problem. Personally, I don't carry bear spray a lot of the time when I'm out in the field. Walking with these bears or following them around, that sort of thing for my own research. But if there's an overly aggressive bear, you better believe I'm going to be grabbing a big old stick or something and just to, make the bear feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, I'd
Okay.
recommend looking at BearWise before your trip or on your way up, stopping at your local DNR office. We got lots of handouts we can provide too.
There's a really cute magnet you can get that's bear shaped. Recommend it. Um, Richard asks about hummingbird feeders. It sounded like we were saying to not have them out in the warm weather, but that's the only time hummingbirds are here. Are we advocating for not feeding hummingbirds currently, or speak to that?
Yes, I'm going to qualify that with unsecured hummingbird feeders. So that's usually the first question we get. So we'll say, oh, put your bird feeders away. The next follow-up is, what about hummingbird feeders? Well, most managers and biologists, we just call this bear Kool-Aid. And so it is a significant draw. Generally, they're smaller and you can hang them up super high, so the bear's not going to get into them, or you can protect them with an electric fence, that sort of thing. If you want to go fully without feeding hummingbirds, what I would recommend is go into some of the landscaping for wildlife books. There's lots of really good landscaping options or hanging baskets that provide nectar that the hummingbirds will love. But if you simply must feed hummingbirds, it needs to be in a way that the bears can't access it. That way it doesn't damage your feeders, train train bears that hummingbird feeders are food, and then it also allows you to enjoy the hummingbirds for sure.
Okay. Jennifer says not all backpacking sites have bear-proof lockers. Can you share tips for where to hang bear bags at your campsite while backpacking?
This is a controversial one, and so I actually don't like bear hangs at all. There are those that can do them well, but depending on where you're backpacking, or in the boundary water, specifically in the burn down or the fire areas, there just aren't trees that are suitable to do it. So it's if you wish to do a bear hang, there's lots of good recommendations from the U.S. Forest Service for how to do that. I would recommend going with some sort of bear-proof container. We can't recommend specific brands, but there are a number of bear-resistant containers, and you can go on either the Interagency Grizzly Bear recovery team. They have a list of bear-proof containers that have been tested for grizzly bears to tear apart. But any of the standard bear barrels that are carried, the backpack size, they do add a little bit of weight. If you're an ultralight hiker, that's kind of an issue. But Ursack is another option that's softer. Yeah, they'll get to smash your stuff, but if you combine that with a hang, often that's better. But I just usually carry the blue barrel when I go. Not the Boundary Waters 30-gallon drum, the smaller one that fits in a backpack.
All right, another question from Philip. In the Boundary Waters, are bears more likely to come in for food at night or during the day?
Yeah, so in general, bears are called crepuscular, and so dawn and dusk is their most active time, but nighttime is often when they can get away with a little bit more. That said, the bears that have capitalized in the boundary waters on raiding packs, they're active during the day. They'll just loaf for a lot of hours and kind of rest when it's hot and go to a cool area, that sort of thing. They're most active at dawn and dusk, but nighttime is where where most of the problems are. That doesn't mean you're not going to see a bear during the day. I've seen a couple bears during the day just in the last week here driving around. So there's no perfectly safe time, but your risks of encountering a bear are much closer as you get to nighttime.
It sounds like my cat's schedule. I think they're the same kind.
Evening zoomies for sure.
When hiking, is carrying a bell effective at making bears aware of you, or is it more of a curiosity that might attract bears?
No, a bell works just fine. It's there are a couple options actually. I have some right here. And so I like the kind that has a silencer. This is one from Japan. And so when you twist it on, it'll ring on its own. And then when you want it to be quiet, you untwist it and it's silent. Some of them use magnets for that sort of thing. And you don't have to have a bell on your pack at all times. It does get annoying. Having a conversation is a perfectly acceptable thing as well. You're out in nature to appreciate nature. But as you get into places that perhaps are a little bit more likely to hold bears, so coming through berry patches or a bit more brush, a little heavier, thicker woods, that'd be the time where a bell would be just fine. Or you can have a conversation with your buddy or talk to yourself, sing a song. It sounds crazy, but it, just in those areas where a bear might not hear you ahead of time, just to have a little bit extra sound can help.
Great. Have there been reported bear conflicts on the Superior Hiking Trail?
Yes, I don't have the full list of where those are, but yeah, that's prime bear country. Um, there are bears pretty much everywhere in the state. In general, during the daytime, the hiking trail is active enough, at least on the busier stretches, where it's less likely to be an issue. But um, it's perfectly commonplace where you'll just happen to come across a bear on the trail. The overly aggressive bears stealing packs and stuff, that's less of an issue. It's a big deal like on the Appalachian Trail as you get into New York. In fact, there was a bear called Double Yellow that she figured out and taught her cubs how to open those bear resistant containers. But we don't have any sort of the level of issues that we do here, mostly just because visitation is much lower.
Cool. Ingrid wants to know, do bears swim?
Yes, they are fantastic swimmers. We have bears that migrate from Grand Rapids all the way up to Atikokan, so across the Quetico. And so she gave birth to cubs in January and then came back to Grand Rapids in like a 2-week period in May. And so she had those little squirts on her back and swam most of the way because the Rainy River Basin was flooded. It was all that flooding that was happening up on the Canadian border a few years ago. So they're excellent swimmers. We've had a couple yearlings a few years ago showed up and climbed onto an oar boat in two harbors. So they're great swimmers.
Wild. I think those are all of our actual questions, but we got a little bit of time left. So please, if you got other burning bear thoughts or questions, add them to the chat. Kim did say when I was a kid, we would bring metal cups and spoons to make noise in case bears were by our camp, which is a good tip.
Absolutely. As anybody camping with an early riser knows, the minute those old enamelware coffee cups get busted or broken out, they are loud as can be and you don't get to sleep in. So that's a great suggestion.
Gonna give it another minute or two in case anyone's typing something after my prompt to ask another question. You got any other bear facts you didn't get to share with us you want to tell us?
I think the main thing that I just want to reiterate is that bears are not an inherently dangerous critter. Yeah, they're big, like a female is 250 pounds in the summertime. The males can be 350 or more, but they're not inherently a dangerous critter. They do need to be respected. They can hurt us if they decide to, but in general, it's an extremely rare event. Since the 1980s, when we started recording this, there have been about 13 separate people that have been injured to the point that required hospitalization by bears, and nobody has been mortally wounded by bears. And so you think about all the people in Minnesota that are out and about all summer interacting with these bears. It's an incredibly rare thing. So you don't have to necessarily be afraid of bears, but just being aware that they're out there and you're in bear country is just a good mindset to have.
Lovely. All right, we did get a couple more questions during that. So Ingrid wants to know the largest number of cubs born to one mom. I don't know if that means in one litter or over the course of your life, but if you know either answer, I'd be
I
interested.
I think I know both answers. So to the latter one, the oldest a bear has ever lived that we know of in the wild is one of the ones that we had collared up near Grand Rapids. Her name was Bear 56. There's a really sweet article about her in the Conservation Volunteer a few years ago. It's called The Shy Bear. And so we collared her when she was 7 years old. We can figure out how old they are from the rings in the teeth. And she lived to 39 and a half, which is just a staggeringly long time for a female. She started having cubs, her first litter of cubs at 5, and she had a litter every other year until she was 25, and then had no cubs after that. So she hit menopause or baropause. Reproductive senescence is the $5 word for that, and didn't have cubs after that. As for litter size, in general, the most common litter size in Minnesota is 3. When females have their first litter, it's more often 2, but like 2.7 is the statewide average. The most that we've seen in our collared bears is 5. We had a female have 2 litters of 5 back to back. So females, she had 5 cubs, then she had 5 yearlings, and then had 5 cubs again, and then 5 more yearlings. But we have gotten a picture, at least 2 pictures now, one from Badger, Minnesota in the far northwest, and another in Crow Wing County, close to Brainerd, of we're pretty sure is a female with 6 cubs, counting heads. It's never happened in our research, but it is possible. The highest I've ever heard of is 6.
Wow. Philip says, if I wanted to look for bears to take photos of them and see them in the boundary waters, what type of areas would I target? Marshes, creeks, hillsides?
That's the hard question. So in the boundary waters specifically, in springtime, it's going to mostly be wetlands. So right now, they're going to be eating wetland plants, arrowhead and skunk cabbage, grass, clover, that sort of thing. And so open meadows is another good spot to be. In general, the boundary waters bear population is relatively low compared to some of the other places in the state, just because there's no oak trees there and there's not a lot of food up on that beautiful bedrock that we all adore. Lots of jack pines, but just not a whole lot of other bear foods. There are a few operations where you can go take pictures of free ranging bear, but it's a fed situation. There's a place near Orr that you can do that. Otherwise, for just taking photos of bears, if you want to look at grizzlies, Anan Bear Sanctuary is in the Tongass National Forest in Alaska. They have this beautiful viewing platform that you have to get a permit to go in, but the bears are out feeding. It's wonderful. And then McNeil River, of course, in Alaska as well. That's where Fat Bear Week is held every single year, and it's on the McNeil River at Katmai National Park.
That transitions perfectly into Gina's question. She says, I'm traveling to Alaska this summer. Is there anything we should do differently being in brown bear and black bear country?
Yeah, so black bears are a little different. Alaska Fish and Game will certainly have recommendations for going into brown bear country. The big differences there is, so females with cubs are much more defensive of their cubs, the brown bears are, than black bears. That's where a lot of that don't ever get between a mom and her cubs came from, is brown bears. With black bears, generally they'll leave or flee and send the cubs up a tree. But I would recommend definitely carrying or just renting bear spray when you're out and about. Follow any of the regulations. If you're going up fishing, like say on the Kenai River, Russian River, that sort of thing, disposing of your fish entrails in the stream itself is recommended. That way there's nothing else for the bears to come feed on, and then doesn't mess with the fishing along the banks. But there's lots of good information from the Forest Service, the parks, as well as Alaska Fish and Game for some more brown bear specific advice. But carrying bear spray is a good idea. You can't fly with bear spray, so you can get it up there locally, or there's rental places you can get it from.
And that's another benefit of BearWise is with the western states being partner states now, there's a lot of grizzly bear specific information on BearWise as well.
Chris asked about finding bear spray and if there's major retailers that we work with to get it in stock or where to locate it.
Yeah, so just a normal brick and mortar. So up north, I've picked it up at in the past, I've picked it up at, what is that, Outdoor World, what used to be Gander Mountain. Fleet Farm has carried it in the past. I'm not sure if they still do. L&M Fleet Supply. I believe REI sells it, but also online retailers, you can get it super easy. UDAP or pepperpro.com, they're a vendor for bear spray. Amazon carries it if you wish to use that as your platform. Otherwise, Counter Assault is another common brand that's used as well. And so online, it's ubiquitous. You can get it lots of places. If you're going up to the boundary waters, many of the outfitters will have access to it or will carry it that you can either rent or buy it from in general as well. You just have to check with your outfitter.
I'm going to combine two questions that are semi-related. What's the mortality rate of cubs if a mom has 5 cubs? How many will survive the first year? And then if you do get in between a mom and her cubs, what should you do?
Great questions. So the litter size and overall cub survival doesn't really change all that much. Overall cub survival is about 80%. And so out of a litter of 5, you'd expect 4 of them to survive in any given year, or in any given litter. But moms are mother bears are just super good moms, and they really watch out for the little ones. Often it's the males who have slightly lower survival rates, the male cubs, than females. They're more, how to phrase this? They can be more adventuresome, and they don't follow as tightly to mom as the female cubs do, and so their survival rate is slightly lower in the high 70s, and the females are slightly higher in the low 80s. But if you end up in between mom and her cubs, what's likely to happen is she'll make some sort of noise, and that sound means get up a tree or come down to me, one of those two things. She's communicating with the cubs. She'll make some grunts and that sort of thing. And so oftentimes when you walk into a situation, you'll either hear skittering up a tree or come across mom or come across cubs. It's like, okay, mom has to be nearby. And so what you should do is the same thing we recommend for everything. Make yourself known, be aware, keep your head on a swivel, but make yourself big, back out of the situation. And then once you're clear, head back the way you came and choose maybe another route for the near future.
Chris wants to know, is there a minimum number of volts you should have for bears while using energized fences while camping?
Oh, that is a great softball question. So it's variable from where you are in the state. It depends how good the grounding is versus not. If you're talking about like a camping kit, like a outfitter's kit or something, if you're hunting up in Alaska or in brown bear country where you set it around your tents and your cook stove, there you're looking for probably a minimum of about 7,500 volts is kind of what I would shoot for, and you're looking for an output joules of somewhere in the 0.6 to 0.7 range. For agriculture and more like permanent stuff around home, we still recommend an output joules of about 0.6. 5 to 7,000 volts is more than sufficient. It just depends on the situation. The other thing to remember with any sort of electric fence is grounding is the most important thing. And so if you're like bringing an electric fence up to an area with really thin soils or really dry soils, take that into consideration and try to get it grounded as best you can. You can pour water on the grounding rods, that even if they're short and temporary, to get that good grounding, and that's what's going to complete that circuit. But we have lots of information up on our, BearWise, I should say, has a good general rule for electric fencing. Otherwise, you can if you're curious about more specific designs for home or that sort of thing, your local area wildlife management office can get you some of that information.
Great. And then Dan asks, any tips on tracking bears or coming across bear tracks? If you see bear tracks, is it better to avoid the area or is it safe to proceed and adopt safe practices like making noise?
Definitely the latter. You don't have to really worry about bears, just knowing it depends on the track itself. So generally, if the soil is wet and the tracks are fresh, that means a bear is in the area. So just take normal precautions as you would. If it's more than a few hours old, that bear is likely long gone, unless it's, you're in a berry patch. If you find scat that's still warm, then you got a very fresh bit of bear sign. And definitely take those safer protocols. But if it's started to dry out already, generally that bear's moved on. Like you can, in the fall season, they have to eat something like 20,000 calories a day. And so they're moving 5+ miles a day just on their own. So they're booking and just eating like Pac-Man on, eating pills just on the landscape, wagga, 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 just keeping going. And so they don't slow down for much. So they move on pretty quick.
Great. All right. I think that was 18 questions. Sounds perfect. Great questions, everyone. Thank you so much, Andy and Franklin, for your knowledge and time. I think we can wrap it up a little bit early. Yeah, this was episode 212. Next week, we've got episode 213, which is about agates in Minnesota. So you can learn why that area around Lake Superior is so perfect for finding agates. So make sure to register for that on our website. And that's all I got. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, y'all.